Was the Force strong with this one, or just misused? Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, is next.
You refer to the prophecy of the one who will bring balance to the Force. You believe it's this boy?
He can see things before they happen.
He can help you.
The Force is unusually strong with him.
He was meant to help you.
Anakin! Tell him to take off!
Will I ever see you again?
What does your heart tell you?
Are you sure about this? Trusting our fate to a boy we hardly know?
Anakin Skywalker, meet Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I sense much fear in you.
The boy is dangerous. They all sense it. Why can't you?
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Welcome to Fantasy Picks Movie Edition, a podcast that explores overhyped films that failed at the box office or critically. In some occasions succeeded in both, but still failed with true hardcore fans. We discuss what we think went wrong, and dare we say, do our own fantasy picks on story and cast to make it better. I'm your host, Robert Mota. I want you guys to welcome back Mark Kirkman from Adrenaline Cinema.
Hey, everybody.
And joining us today for the first time, Zach Book.
What's going on?
This is going to be a special episode because out of all the movies that we normally get into, this is the one that it seems like it kind of brings up a lot of passion in people. And of course, we're all fans about it. But yes, we're going to talk about Star Wars: The Phantom Menace in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about Doctor Strange. And we're not going into spoilers or anything. Just want to, see what you guys. I know, Zach, you haven't seen it, right?
No, I have not.
Have you heard anything on it?
I've just heard that it's been fairly well received by the people I know that have seen it, but nothing specific.
I mean, this is a movie that so far has done, I believe it's, $688 million. So
yeah,
obviously
globally,
Disney and Marvel are having a good time, with that. But, and in Rotten Tomato, it's been what? Mark, you actually told me.
It was like an 86 fan score?
Yeah.
84 in that range?
Yeah, it's
fan score of 86%. Yep. Which is pretty good. I mean, that's freaking amazing. And then how about critics?
Critics or fans?
Well, there's critics and then there's fans.
All right. So with this, if we look for audience score, it's 86%. For the tomatometer or whatever it is called, it's 74%.
74%, which a lot of people saying that, hey, Sam Raimi's back. He hasn't filmed something in over 10 years, I believe. Yeah, so a lot of people like the fact that he came back, and of course the film does reflect a lot of the Sam Raimi stuff that he does, but at the same time a lot of people have not been happy with certain things that he has done with the film. So I think, Zach, whenever you see it, I mean, you'll probably, if you're a big Marvel fan like the rest of us are, and especially if you grew up, reading comic books and stuff like that, he took some liberties on certain things that even...
Well, you and I both discussed this after work as we were talking, and
right.
We did enjoy the movie as a whole. And
Correct.
Like I had stated before to you, I did enjoy this as a Sam Raimi film. Now, mind you, as far as a Marvel film that Sam Raimi has done, he threw every Raimi-ness within this particular film. Now, mind you, it stated that he hadn't really paid any attention to WandaVision at that point. And he was literally just taking off. And this was during the pandemic, and they actually, filmed WandaVision during the pandemic. and he probably didn't get privy to anything. So basically, it was left in his hands to create this story, which is very interesting, very entertaining. I had a great time with it. I love the digital aspects of it, as well as the practical effects as well that Raimi does. And of course, you got Bruce Campbell. So if you guys have not seen the film, go out there, watch it.
Yeah, absolutely, watch it. You'll see what we're talking about. I mean, there's, for those who are fans of Marvel and those are fans of like Doctor Strange, especially the character of the Scarlet Witch. Like I said, he took some liberties on that. I thought the Illuminati were fan service, but at the same time, I mean, it was a treatment that he did, and some people agreed to it or not. But I would say I definitely will recommend everybody to see it. I think the more I see it and the more I hear about it, there's certain things, just like the next movie that we're about to cover today. The more you see it,
the more you appreciate
the more you hear about it, the more you start to question things,
or appreciate it too. Just the same too. You can appreciate the movie regardless of it being bad. Now, mind you, with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, there are things that they could fix within it going forward with the Marvel Universe because of Kevin Feige, because they have so much more to work with. Now, with this is cemented within the Star Wars universe, if you think about it, with the Phantom Menace.
And
so at this point, a lot of this stuff is already canon. So we already know this, and this is where I leave Rob to actually guide us more.
Yeah. So our movie on this episode is going to be Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, as I said before. And I'll touch about a little bit on history on that. So, George Lucas, this is actually the brainchild, of course, of George Lucas, who has created an amazing franchise, an amazing, IP. And Star Wars was a big phenomenon in the film industry. One, because no one has ever seen anything like it.
Nope.
The visual effects, from the visual effects to the sound effects to the score, everything was so new that if you were alive back in the 70s, you would know that for some reason people had Star Wars fever so much that there was even disco songs made for Star Wars.
Actually, I have that on my playlist. So
yeah, so the marketing was insane. We're talking about, it was just, no matter where you saw it on the Donnie and Marie show, you saw it on the Muppet show, it was something that was never seen before. Then, of course, he did Empire Strikes Back. He did Jedi, and the whole trilogy kind of put things, all together. We always heard the rumor that there was going to be 9 films, and we were all, as fans, we're all like, wow, I would love to see all these films. I want more Star Wars. We wanted more Star Wars so much that we even accepted the holiday special. And when you look at that thing now, you want to basically puke.
It's rough. It's really
great
rough.
Points within that holiday special that we should really do appreciate. The whole introduction to Boba Fett. That is
the
best part.
Only thing, right? That I was gonna say, that's the only thing that I would say that came out really good out of that. I mean, but the some of the singing, some of the stuff on there. I mean,
it's kind of dated for its time. I do agree with it, honestly.
But we accepted it because it was the only Star Wars we got.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing. But we were there, glued to the TV, watching it at that time. Rob, you and I both know that we were there at that time when it showed up on TV, and watched it on ABC.
And we were surprised. We were like, what the fuck is this?
Also, too, and on top of that, we also love the fact that it was all 70s. It literally was within the 70s at that point.
Yeah, that is correct. But Star Wars did something very interesting, which, so like I said, George Lucas, in order for him to make Star Wars, he had to come up with his own effects company. He had to come up with his own technology from that effects company. He did so much for the film industry that nowadays a lot of people take for granted, that what you see on the screen is really it's the fact that it came from all the hard work that these people in ILM did. And so all the visual effects that you see nowadays basically stem off of that.
Yeah.
A lot of filmmakers nowadays have credited Star Wars with being the one thing that made them be a filmmaker. A lot of people saw Star Wars. They sat there. Even James Cameron sat there and said, "That's what I want to do."
Exactly.
So it was one of those movies that really changed the
movie industry as a standard for special
as a whole.
effects. Yes.
It's special effects, but also the fact, even how they filmed, the type of, cameras they were using. There was a lot that they did that was really impressive. And, George Lucas was a part of that. Now, of course, once that trilogy was over, we were like, well, shit, what else have we got? And Star Wars actually became, it came out in comic books. It came out in certain books. But people wanted more. That didn't happen. And then 17 years later, what do we get? We get George saying, hey, we're going to get another Star Wars film.
Or a series at that point, too. It's literally a trilogy.
Exactly. He wanted to touch upon the first 3 movies because, remember, the Star Wars films are really the story about Darth Vader, at least according to him. So Phantom Menace takes place 17 years before, it was 17 years before we got a new film, but this takes place when the Republic is still, the Republic that they talked about. This is still the Jedis that we were always told about, and that we always heard about. So this is and this is the more Jedis, and we, instead of just Obi-Wan, we got more than just Obi-Wan. We got Obi-Wan training. We got Anakin being a small kid, and we all know what Anakin was going to turn into.
Exactly.
So this is something that we were just so...
This was the prequel. I think this was the prequel that we were all longing for, to understand where Anakin came from, how he became the Darth Vader that we all know from Episode 4. And then it's literally, it's like, okay, instead of George's great opus of where it was a whole movie which expanded upon this, and originally that's what it was. He kind of broke it up where, okay, he did the middle part first, he did the beginning last, and then years later we got through Marvel/Disney, or Disney at that point, the last half of what was going on within Star Wars. Which is interesting and fun altogether, but mind you, if you do it consecutively and watch it with your kid, if you have any kids, that is, because I don't have any. Rob doesn't. Rob, you have some, don't you?
Well, I have my daughter, and yes, I mean my stepdaughter, and she and the way I watch Star Wars with her, I remember watching the whole thing, and her mom was not happy about it because she was like, damn, this takes a lot. Not that she didn't like it. She's just like, I got to go through this shit again.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, my nieces actually do appreciate the series. They have watched it. My goddaughter loved it. She watched it from the beginning, and she goes, Uncle Mark, there's a lot of issues within this movie. And then, mind you, she should be on this podcast because she understood. And she watched all the other movies afterwards and going, I have a lot of questions, and there are a lot of questions involved. But the thing is that we're narrowing this down to this particular movie, which is Phantom Menace.
Yes. And Phantom Menace, here's the whole thing about Phantom Menace. Phantom Menace did exactly what the first Star Wars did, which was, the first Star Wars, when it first came out, a lot of people were like, what is this Star Wars? And then it just gained momentum. This already has so much momentum before it hit the screens that they already predicted this was going to be, of course, gigantic. But the movie did something else, just like Star Wars did, like, the first Star Wars did, which it changed the film industry again.
Yeah, it did.
George went into a lot of digital, he, instead of using film, he decided he was going to use digital. There was a lot of innovations that he did in this film that, again, some filmmakers, of course, took advantage of, but other filmmakers did not, were not open to. So, Zach, you want to touch about film with digital
yes,
instead of film. Yeah.
No, and I think that the one beneficial or positive thing that I'll say about Star Wars, and specifically George and kind of his vision, has always been doing what his creative vision is without any restraint. And I think that even though this is, 1999, right, or in production even earlier than that, we're using digital props. We're using digital people or digital units in this movie, digital actors, for one of the first times for a movie this size, right? And I think that part of that was served because of just logistical purpose, right? You've got thousands upon thousands of battle droids. All those battle droids are running around on screen that are digitally generated. They're carrying on such a major plot point in the movie. We're substituting other characters that were previously practical effects like Master Yoda and all these other different things that have just kind of made it a staple of like what Star Wars has to do to get the movie done. So it's, I'll kind of also mention an anecdote on my own end. So I just went down to Disney. I hung out in the Galaxy's Edge.
Ooh.
And I took
Nice.
back such an amazing feeling from that trip. Because for me, I'm 28. And so when Phantom Menace was just coming out, I was 5. I was 5 years old. And so when I had first seen that movie, I was just completely blown away by it, because obviously I'm a 5-year-old. I was really, really lucky to have been given the opportunity to see A New Hope, some different of the original trilogy movies, because of my parents. My dad exposing me to those movies. And so going into that movie, I was already a huge fan of what this universe was. Not fully capturing what the universe really even is. But part of that amazing wonder and that amazing feeling, I the one thing that I took away from that park was I was in the Millennium Falcon. And I was in the Millennium Falcon where they had the, what is it, Sabacc? Or I forget what the game is called.
Oh, you're talking about the one with the little puppets.
Yeah, the little hologram guys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so
chess, the
chessboard,
right?
Yeah, so like I was in the middle of this room, this for lack of a better term, living room inside of a Millennium Falcon, and I was just completely blown away. One of my number one experiences of that trip was being in this practical effect in this set, right? But a reproduction of that set that was literally a waiting line for one of the rides at Disney. And like just that presence and that feeling of that was just really, really awesome. And so a lot of, I think, what we'll talk about in this podcast is talking about how obviously George Lucas did an amazing job creating a universe. And if by purpose or by accident, he completely changed how people viewed sci-fi and fantasy and, space movies. And I think that that's just kind of one of the huge examples. As far as digital goes, I mean, the digital stuff, I think, just for a reference back to the original, New Hope, Empire, and obviously
Jedi.
Return of the Jedi. Like a lot of those huge advancements and effects were done out of necessity. How would Star Wars have been if not for those effects?
Yeah,
so,
I do
just something
agree.
to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, and the like I said, like you were just saying, everything was out of necessity. George this time, with the amount of money he had and everything, he just said, you know what? Now I finally have the money to do things the way I wanted to do it. And still, he went ahead and tinkered with this movie years later because the technology was still not there compared to what he wanted. I mean, especially compared to what it is now. I always wonder what it would have been like if he tackled Star Wars for the first time in this digital age and how that would have come off. But
definitely.
But yeah,
you're talking
completely seamless
basically
now.
about the reissues back in the 90s when we got to see episodes 4, 5, and 6 when he changed those movies.
Right.
And to me, honestly, I saw those in the theaters and we all were raging and going crazy with our lightsabers up in the air and having a great time because of the digital advancements. Now, mind you, that's not something that's going to go into the vaults. Right,
definitely.
Yeah, because they wanted the original movie from 1977 that I saw when I was 5 years old. I don't know about you, Rob, but I saw it in the theater when I was 5. And
I was 9.
You were 9. Oh my god.
Writing that down. I'm putting down a timeline on my paper here.
So I was 5 years old. I saw that with my aunt and my uncle. They were babysitting me, and but to me, honestly, I remember that fluidly, completely.
Right.
And honestly, that should be in the vaults. But when he kind of like sent that out to them to put into the vaults, he put the reissues, and they said, "No, we want the original." He goes, "No, this is my idealistic thought." And it's just like
no, and that's that could be a whole other podcast, honestly, on the you being the owner of that IP, and hey, I want to tinker with something that people already love.
Yeah, exactly right.
It is yours, and maybe
Reconstruct.
And just like any artist, you might say, somebody might tell you, "Hey, man, that looks great," or that is great, or that sounds great. But in your mind, you being the artist and you being the creator, you were never satisfied with the product. And the fact that you have the ability to go back to that product and
change it,
tinker with it.
Yeah.
Do you
it's
have
cheating.
a right to do that after you release something and people already love what you had? I mean, that's a big question, and that's been a argument now for, I would say, years, if not decades. Because people are like, "No, I want the original." Other people are like, "No, I don't mind the digital part." And according to George, it's like, "Fuck you, this is mine. I could do whatever the hell I want."
Exactly.
So
it's interesting, right? If you compare that, so like I'm a musician, and Mark, I know you play music as well, and like for me, like if I make a piece of music with some friends, like if you've ever sat down and done the recording process and like the mastering and the mixing and there's always going to be something as you go back and listen to that you're like, oh, well, this could be a little different. And I think that one of the cool things about intellectual property and just kind of what we do is that, like, when it comes to almost making a parody or covering our own content, like, you can re-release something later, but it's not going to be the same. You can't go back and change the experience that you first impacted somebody with.
Yeah,
correct.
And I think that it's always going to be something that a creator is going to be tempted to do. Because as you grow and as your opinions change, like the place that you modify that information from is different.
Yeah, exactly.
As a creator.
It's different at that time when you release it again in a new format. And my feeling is I can understand where the film... What was it exactly? The film vaults or whatever it was... They wanted to have the original, as it were, and I would love that just the same. Me, I hold on to all my original content. I don't change it. If anything, I would actually re-record anything that I have done and then call it 2.0 or what have you. But the thing is that with George Lucas, he was at a standstill at that point with those original trilogies and saying, hey, well, this is what I have. This is what I want to be known for. Honestly, put the original in as it is.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, look, they have done things like I'll give you a perfect example of that, like Blade Runner. There's 7 different releases of Blade Runner.
Oh yeah.
Which is crazy. But here's what's interesting about that is that you can find all 7 different releases out there.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, they have sold I would say compilations of all of them, with the narration, without the narration, and then of course Ridley Scott, which I just did a top 5 of Ridley Scott with actually Ralph on the last episode. He did the last one was done, and he approved the last one. He didn't do the other 5.
Yeah.
He did the first one and the last one. That's why it says the final cut. But he didn't go out there and say, you know what? No, this is the only cut. You can never release the other ones. I don't want those anywhere to be shown or nothing like that. George was very, very adamant about like, no, this is a fight.
He censored himself. It's I think that it's dishonest. Not to say anything negative towards George, but like I think it's dishonest to say, hey, I was never here. Obviously, that creative content for that time, I think it was still super impactful. If you look at the box office figures of Phantom Menace, you look at all that, that was like right out the gate what it was. If you look at the old ones for the original trilogy, same thing. And as you get more content or more ability or more anything else or different opinions, like you can't go back and say, oh, well, this is how it always was. Like that's just
Right.
No,
right.
I really
Seems
think
dishonest,
Phantom Menace was
artistically.
based upon fandom itself. And you had fandoms stemming from the time when the original show or movie started back in 1977 all the way on. Now, a credit to that would be the movie Fanboys, which I'm a huge fan of. And it's them going out to San Francisco and breaking into Lucas's private gallery to get a hold and watch that particular movie. Now, mind you, it holds a lot of personal feeling to that because I think I thought the same way as those kids at that point, but I didn't go upon that. But they created a movie based upon that and made a great movie based upon the idea and thought and structure. Right. And you could tell it's like at the very end when they say, well, he watched it. Now, mind you, that spoilers, if you didn't watch Fanboys, I don't know why you're here, because obviously if you didn't watch it, you know, the ending, the character dies because of cancer. But one of the other character goes, he was like, but what if it's bad? And that literally, this movie came out years after Phantom Menace obviously has come out. They kind of make jokes about, you know, Harrison Ford and him doing another movie that was an adventure, which he was like, he was in Blade Runner, he was Han Solo, he was Indiana Jones. What bad movie can he do? And I passed by the poster of a movie at that time when Phantom Menace was coming out, and it was so bad because it had Anne Heche in it. And it was him playing a pilot of all things too, and apparently Harrison Ford's a bad pilot. So
that's fine.
But the thing is that it pokes on the idea of we were looking forward to this particular film for so many years as fans who grew up with it in the 70s. Right. And then you have kids that grew up, like Zach and everybody else, that grew up on these particular films and were brought into this. And honestly, it kind of gave us something that we always wanted. And I think the first reaction, and like myself, I would say, I love this particular film. Why? Because it's the first Star Wars film we've had in over like 2 decades.
Yeah, just about.
And then when we got to see it, it was like, oh, it's the greatest thing, you know, than chocolate. You know, we have to have it. And then over time, people got, I had time to ingest this. I've watching it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I had time to think about this for a second.
And then it's just like, they could have changed that.
And the more you watch it, the more you start to question certain things.
Yeah.
Because now,
now
Absolutely. The fandom part, even though you're a fan, now the fandom part just kind of
the new car smell wore off,
right? And then now the logic part of your head is going, but wait a minute. And that's the thing we'll touch upon in just a moment. One thing I wanted to touch upon also, Mark, was
what's up?
How digital filming, especially with some, you know, with so many digital characters, how that made actors feel.
Oh, yeah. If you think about it, everything had to be done on green screen. And a lot of these actors kind of have to play off one another. But there's also the fact of, like, the field or the world that they're in. Everything else is green, in their opinion. So they have to go on the guidance of the director. Everything that's there in front of them. The direction within the script. And then they're like, oh, I have to envision this in my head. I have to play make-believe in my head with the person in front of me that I actually have to act in front of.
Right.
You know,
takes away the human element of what it is to act.
Literally, that's what it is. But then they have to figure out what is the full spectrum in their head. They actually have to actually do this. And I think that's why Hugo Weaving actually left after doing and fulfilling his screen adaptation of the Red Skull in the first Captain America. And then we got Ross Marquand to actually voice Red Skull within what was it, Endgame at that point? And yeah, it was Endgame.
It was actually both. It was Endgame and oh shoot, I'm forgetting the other Avengers movie.
Well, before that, what I'm stating,
the two last Avengers movies that so he was in both.
Yeah, Infinity War and then Endgame.
Infinity War, yeah.
But he had to actually, literally, convey all that information. So Ross actually had to play the character of Red Skull with not really being there. Right. And with Hugo Weaving in the very beginning, when he started doing Captain America and he was being the Red Skull, he didn't want to play upon green. He wanted to play upon particular actors. And he didn't want to do that towards the end, so that's why they kind of passed it off to Ross.
Right. And mind you, a lot of people don't realize that while Phantom Menace did have a lot of digital elements into it, there was a lot of practical effects.
Yes, there were.
And there was a lot of practical sets and things like that people don't realize. People think, oh, well, everything was digital. No, actually, in Phantom Menace, he did a lot more practical effects than his other movies, his other 3 movies in Star Wars, but he also did a lot more digital effects than his other 3 movies. I mean, that one movie actually had as much digital effects, I believe, than all 3, the first 3 Star Wars movies, of course. Mm-hmm. But I think what people didn't realize also is that as these movies progress, and he thought, oh, I don't need that many sets. Oh, I don't need that many, things in here. I could just do everything digital. Made the actors even more pissed off because it's like, all right, I'm acting with a ball.
Yeah.
In front of me.
Actually, I want to point something out there too. The first interaction between Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan and he's interacting with Jar Jar. His line of sight is way off. By at least a good 6 to 8 inches off, and he's looking way higher than what it should be. And and as a rewatch, I watched it and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess,
Yep.
Oh, you can see all the little things that you're like, I don't know if somebody was there to, But now we'll get into actually, and you know what? And you're right. There are things that work, things that didn't work. So I'm going to get into the stuff that worked for this movie because there's, again, we can nitpick this movie. And this is the one movie that I believe that everyone who is a Star Wars fan really has come down on because compared to the other films, it is, when it comes to the story, when it comes to the acting, when it comes to all these things, it wasn't up to snuff. So I put a list. I did a list right here of the things that I felt that worked. And honestly, I think the number one thing that definitely worked in this film was the score.
Yeah.
Well,
I think John Williams is just phenomenal
exactly
at everything he does. And I couldn't imagine. And actually, I think I heard somewhere that he's basically insisting on coming back for the new Obi-Wan show too.
Oh wow!
He said he was done with Star Wars after, I forget which one it was, if it was Rise of Skywalker or
he was done with Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, but he's like, nah, man. Like, I know you guys have done a bunch of shows, but like, if we're gonna have Obi-Wan on screen again, like, I want to be there for it. Like, wow. And it's just John Williams has been around for so long, and I can't think of a more successful composer. And I think that his score has aged phenomenally, and I think that just the sense of adventure just completely just guides that movie into place, regardless of what's going on screen. It's really, really fulfilling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because it's the one score. So when we first heard the score, especially the Duel of the Fates, it was so different than, of course, the other movies that he did, of course. But it was such an iconic piece that Duel of the Fates is funny how Duel of the Fates gets used in so many different Star Wars properties. Everything from even the new Obi-Wan show. They had Duel of the Fates on there, on the trailer, and everybody, of course, fanned out. I fanned out. I was like, "Holy shit, this is awesome!" I mean, this
it's amazing.
It gave me those chills once again.
Yep.
Yeah, the score.
That's actually true for a few of the themes.
Yeah,
in
no,
Star
exactly.
Wars.
So, but
I
the
could point out
score,
a
I
couple
think, is
others.
the one thing that I would say, hey, you know what? If I had to redo this movie, yeah, that's the one thing I would definitely leave in there.
Well, the best thing about that is when this movie came out, they put this as a music video. The Duel of the Fates was a music video. And it worked perfectly, and they intertwined everything within the particular trailer for us to go see this particular movie. And I watched that particular music video on MTV, everything at that time. And
That's
honestly,
cool.
it's one of those like songs that you just cannot relate to John Williams or Star Wars. You have to. It's like the first thing that you go to. It's Darth Maul. It is Obi-Wan. It's Qui-Gon.
Right.
That is it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's been a few themes like that have popped up. Duel of Fates is one of, I think frankly it slaps, right? I think that it's one of the most amazing themes that's out there when it comes to any dramatic scene in a movie. Another one that comes up a lot if you're like the Force theme, or if you think of it as like the binary sunset theme. So if you're talking about the end of A New Hope as Luke stares off into the dual suns of Tatooine.
The two suns on Tatooine. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
it's
absolutely.
Just this melody of hope and this melody of like who that character is. But that theme comes up anytime something altruistic or positive or hopeful happens in Star Wars, and it's almost like the what's the is that the bell and the dog or whatever, that one phenomenon where it's like when one thing happens, this happens. Like anytime those themes happen in Star Wars,
Pavlov's dog.
It almost it like triggers you to like, oh, this is like this emotional response. And
look,
it's really
listen,
cool.
if I hear Duel of the Fates, I don't have dog ears, but my ears will perk up and I will move towards the direction
exactly
of where I
it's
heard
coming
that.
from. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm grabbing a lightsaber and getting ready.
Exactly.
So another thing that I thought that worked in this movie was actually, because we've seen, in all three movies, we saw Dagobah, we saw Hoth. We only saw the coldness of the Empire, I guess, on the Death Star and the Star Destroyer. But we also saw a little bit of Coruscant. The one thing that was really cool, I would say, was Cloud City. But when this came out, the design of the Naboo city was just gorgeous. It was so different, but it was just a beautiful, beautiful design. I thought that actually worked very well in this film.
It worked. I think it's something that we think with majesty.
Correct.
And think in prospects of what I think of it more or less of like the British Empire and how everything is to be presented and being proper. And those are my thoughts when it came to that, and it's kind of right now as we're watching the particular movie itself. If we watch it in real time right now, we look at it as its downfall. At that point, it's starting to degrade because of the Imperial March as it comes on.
Fall of Rome.
Yeah, and talking about again that design of Naboo, and it definitely has a very Italian flavor to it and everything. But I remember talking with Zach. The one thing that you could tell about this culture is that everything is aesthetically beautiful. So even their ships, like the starfighters, very different than what we saw before. Before we saw starfighters that were falling apart, dirty. I mean, it has some beautiful lines. And, of course, George Lucas has been always well known for the fact that he's a big car nut. He introduces speed in every movie that he has, whether it's, speeder bikes or having, I don't know, Han Solo in the Millennium Falcon, but also having Indiana Jones, something about speed always comes into hand. But, so the starfighters, I felt like they were these beautiful hot rod looking things. Even the Queen's ship, which was I think modeled after like the SR-71 spy plane, just made it very sleek, very chrome. It was just a beautiful, beautiful design. And I think Doug Chang, who is one of the major designers in ILM right now, is actually I believe he went from artist to what is he? Like probably the vice president of ILM or something like that now. But his design work on Star Wars on Phantom Menace was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring up what you did about the culture and the art, and it's very Renaissance. It's very like artistic rebirth kind of feeling. Everything's very ornate. Everything's full of lush plantation and decorative plants, and the style of the clothing. Right. It's Renaissance era. If you look at like the Royal Guard, right? They have these very big like tabards, these tunics.
Correct.
And to your point with those starships, they almost remind me of like a '60s Corvette. Like they have those beautiful lines, those swooping, very very aesthetically pleasing sort of things.
It's kind of gliding, if you think about it.
Yeah. Very, 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 very gliding, as opposed to the original trilogy. When we're looking at the Empire, it's very geometric. Everything's very angular, and it's all like almost like exploded polygons, like triangles and rectangles. And weird
by the
shapes
time that we actually
air.
get to New Hope, it's pretty much everything has kind of gotten to the point of it was used cars. If you think about it, it's kind of like, oh, okay, the 50s were sleek. They had the cool polished rims of the cars. Everything was molded, kind of rounded out, and looked really cool with their cars. And then by the time that we got to the late 60s, it was kind of like very hard, sharp edges and things of that nature
80s.
into the 70s. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. If we look at our culture now, if you look at things like the Cybertruck from Tesla and like all these very angular things, like if you look at the electronic vehicles we're starting off on, I'm wondering when we're going to start seeing stormtroopers running around. It's like it seems like we're going the same way, because a lot of our vehicles are designed with like these crazy safety standards, and, like, crumple zones, and everything looks like a truck. Everything looks like a really like stout, angry vehicle with like really big dimensions and
big eyes.
Exactly. So guys, so what do you think of how R2D2 got introduced into this film?
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this is something we chatted on just briefly earlier, but I think that it's interesting that Star Wars has always had a very personal feeling with all the droids. They're logic defying, right? And like R2D2 is literally strapped to the bottom or top of this Naboo space cruiser, and there's just volleys of fire picking these astromech droids off. But if you think about it from a logical standpoint, like the fact that R2 is there is just based off of chance. And just like the crazy, like no matter how good of an astromech droid you are, you're not bulletproof, right? So it's this very strange kind of sensation. But like he single-handedly repairs the ship while flying around, and he's commended as a hero.
Yep.
But, like, why is R2 so much better than the other astromech droids? Like, there's no logical reason. Like, he's a programmed machine, but he's always had this air of just heroism. This crazy, like, presence to him.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think it's by chance. And the fact that I think R2 has always been the core of Star Wars from the very beginning.
Yes. From merchandise to styling and everything.
And to the personality. And he is not 3PO, but R2 is the person to go to for literally the historian view of what was going on from the very beginning of meeting Anakin all the way to the very end.
Yeah,
I've really thought about it like that, but you're 100% right. I mean, he's been through everything.
And 3PO is the one that's oblivious, kind of like the girl who has washed her mind out of certain things and didn't really remember everything. So,
I feel like he's also been reset a few times.
Yes, he has.
In the history. He's been, we Control-Alt-deleted his memory a few times.
Well, actually, here's the thing about that, because according to, I think, Dave Filoni or something like that Lucas said he was the only droid that was never wiped. His memory was never wiped. And because of that, he has developed the personality that he has. And it's because they continuously let him just keep going. and he just kind of evolved from there.
Corrupted files now? Is that what he is? He's just a bunch of corrupted files?
Pretty much, yeah. He's basically human.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
He's an AI.
So another one that I actually thought was actually a great character, a character that seems to have history, a character that seems to have a lot of depth, but unfortunately he has such a short run in the Star Wars universe, is Qui-Gon Jinn. Played by Liam Neeson.
Yep.
Like, just such a great character. He was different than the Jedi. He was different than, what we were supposed to imagine a Jedi to be. As a matter of fact, even different than what they showed from the Jedi Council. So, for me, he was just a great person to look at, and you wanted to see more of him.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it just seems like we never got that.
I think we'll get more of him later on with the Obi-Wan show.
I hope so.
30 years later.
Yeah,
hey,
exactly.
it'll work.
But at the time, we were like, shit, Qui-Gon Jinn, awesome. You know what? And let me just start by saying, spoilers ahead, all right? I know we didn't say that towards the beginning of the podcast, but yes, this man dies towards the end, and we're like, man, I mean, I wish I would have seen more. Zach and I, again, we were talking about, like, what would have happened if they would have let him live for, like, the, episodes 2 or episode 3 or something like that, and how much of a change would that story have been?
Well, I think that, just to that point, I think that there's no room for him in those other episodes the way they're written, because it's all supposed to be about this camaraderie between Obi-Wan and the development of Anakin or Darth Vader. And while that's not immediately apparent in the first movie, right, because you have such a strong character within Qui-Gon, they do bring Qui-Gon back later on into some of the animated stuff within Star Wars as a kind of a guest.
Right.
And it's he is such a phenomenal character, played by an amazing, like, super A-list actor, right? I mean, you have Liam Neeson just waltzing on the set of Star Wars, and he's such a defiant character. He doesn't adhere to the stuffiness of the council and how the Jedi councils, and I think we'll get into that as another topic probably, but the Jedi council is just this very stuffy, super bureaucratic, like, there's a code, there's an order, and this is how it's going to happen,
they have rules,
and it's a closed,
blah, blah, blah.
It's like all so closed off and cold, and I think that when you look at the way Anakin and Obi-Wan, especially before Obi-Wan had Anakin, they're also, by the rest of the Order's standing, defiant. Like, they all do, they're chaotic good. They do whatever it is that they want to do to contribute to what they think is right. Even if it means that they tell the Order, absolutely not, I'm going to go do my own thing. Yeah. Or with less words. But, like, Qui-Gon is he's a phenomenal character.
Correct.
There's so much significance behind who he is and what he does, and I think I'd watch a prequel, a prologue version of Qui-Gon Jinn, because I think there's a lot of story there that is in the kind of expanded universe stuff that really kind of gets deeper.
Hey, listen, if they could make a movie with Samuel L. Jackson being de-aged for Captain Marvel, fuck, man, do the same thing with Liam Neeson, de-age him and just do a Qui-Gon movie.
He's getting up there, isn't he? He's got to be really old now.
He's in his 60s.
something,
60s or 70s.
Yeah.
Man. I mean,
well, so is
Samuel
L. Jackson too. So.
Yeah, exactly. So another thing that worked in this film, I think, Coruscant. What do you guys think of Coruscant? I loved the fact that there was an entire world that was a city.
Yeah.
I loved the fact that it was basically the center hub of the entire galaxy.
Yeah.
And I think they portrayed that very well.
It was kind of like the New York City of its time, if you think about it. And I think they kind of made it so perfect and looking so spectacular and perfect. Very much like how New York City was back in, I would say, the 30s. And how brilliant and bright it was. Outside of Hollywood, as it were, because Hollywood was out west. But the thing is, New York City was the hub at that point. And I think that's what they were trying to do with Coruscant at that point as well.
Question for you guys, because of my age, I don't recall the original cuts of the original trilogy as much. but the newer versions of Return of the Jedi have Coruscant in
Yes,
them
they do.
in the end.
They do.
That's an addition,
Yes,
right? That's
it
not
was
an
the
original
addition
feature?
that they did in the 90s.
Got it. So
Yeah.
was that before or after Phantom Menace was released?
That was before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was really the first art that we saw of Coruscant.
Correct.
Because looking back, I'm like, oh, that's Coruscant, of course. But like at the time, like that didn't even ring any bells.
Right.
Yeah.
It was George's evil way, because I always said this. I always said I somehow became George Lucas's bitch. And I say that because every time, like, it was either the marketing or it was him. But when he did the special editions, he knew what he was doing. He said, hey, I'm coming out with this movie, so I'm going to do the special editions to actually bring excitement back to Star Wars. I am going to put certain elements that you are going to see in Phantom Menace.
I do agree.
So, yeah, that fucker's an evil genius. Might not be a great director, but he's an evil genius.
Well, he was trying to create his own world at that point, if you think about it. And he actually tried to do that in the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s, with the Ewok movies. If you remember, the Battle for Endor. And the second movie, which I cannot recall at this point, but you had the two annoying siblings.
Oh,
Yeah. And you can't really find them, but I do own them on DVD. And you
guess what? They're on Disney Plus.
They are on Disney Plus too.
I'll have to check those out. I've never actually seen them.
You never seen them? You got to see
no,
them.
I'll have
they're
to watch
so
them.
dated, but you
They
got to see
are so dated. I actually watched them on TV on ABC, and my father at the time, with his stereo system, tuned in to the radio station so we could watch it and listen to it in stereo.
There's some magic about that for sure. I mean,
And
it's
I
really
did,
cool
which was entertaining, which was fun, but the thing was, were the stories that great? No.
No, they're horrible.
They're horrible. But we got an Ewok show on ABC as well, our cartoon one, as well as a droid show. During that time.
And again, we ate it all up because we thought we are never going to see any more Star Wars, so whatever little they give us,
correct.
Yeah.
We'll take it.
Yep.
Well, and I think I just wanted to slow down on that. I know we're jumping around on our list here, but like when we talk about the way from an architecture standpoint and from just a design standpoint, George Lucas has impacted us so hard with not even any real permanence when it comes to the original trilogy. Like, one of the most notable places is destroyed. Like with Alderaan, the Death Stars get wiped out. Like it's like there's not that many places of significance or continuity aside from Tatooine, right? Oh, and then later like Yavin, which is just a name that comes up in the expanded universe because of the Battle of Yavin.
Battle of Yavin.
Like,
yep.
It was the Return of the Jedi was all around, right? But it's like. It's I'm sorry, New Hope was around, I believe.
Yeah,
but
New Hope.
Either way, it's just like there's all these different like planets that are almost culturally innocuous, right? And then you get into something like Coruscant, and like by the way, at this point we were already bought in, right?
Yeah.
with the Star Wars universe, we're already going, please give us some more of this.
Give us more.
And so like now with something like Coruscant, and namely something like the Jedi Temple.
Correct.
Like we have the Jedi Temple that's just this beautiful structure and this amazing, like it truly is a religious artifact in the middle of this huge city. It's like
we never got that in Phantom Menace though. That was the weird thing. We never got that Jedi Temple within Phantom Menace itself. But
well, I mean, it was in there, but I mean, we saw most of it from out. We didn't see like all we saw was the spire where they have
we see the flybys,
right? The console, but you saw the flybys of this gigantic structure that is like, hey, that's the temple of the Jedi, which made people so excited because again, we had Jedis more than what we had in the original trilogy. And so now we have a temple where we could see them train, and we were hoping to see them train. We were hoping to see them, more of what we saw. We just got a glimpse.
Yeah.
But even that little glimpse was enough for us to be excited.
Yeah.
But yeah, the temple I thought was really nice. And I like the fact that, again, just like the Jedi is a religion, the temple reflected that, just like, I would say that the Catholic Church and the what's the Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
So, exactly. So it was just kind of like the same thing. So you kind of say, oh, okay, I see something that resembles
It's
something.
definitely got some of that big dick Catholic energy when it comes to like the structure, like the magnificence of what that church was. It's true though. Like if you think of like Rome and like the Holy Roman Empire, like the way cathedrals were built is based off of the fact that they were regal. They were part of the aristocracy or the monarchy.
Yeah.
But I think that just that all being said, like I think it was, what was it in A New Hope? I think Obi-Wan mentioned this, like when he was talking about at one point there were 10,000 Jedi Knights roaming the galaxy. I don't remember exactly where that quote came from. But I think that's like, this is the first visual to go along with that.
Yeah, this was the first
like,
taste they were giving us about
right.
them. Yeah.
Right. And it's so crazy because it's like we have this all in the back of our heads as Star Wars fans, like, yes, we finally get to see this stuff, and it's really like this flyby, and then into this chamber of a bunch of people being super rude to Qui-Gon about like wanting to train this kid, and it's like it's just super. It's a weird pill to swallow.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, we saw a world that we heard about, because we always heard about these, this world through books or through something, and all of a sudden we got to see it, and it was actually very exciting. But then we go back again to Tatooine, fucking that dust ball out there, and but we get introduced to, of course, Anakin Skywalker. We get introduced to the entire reason we're there. One of the things I really liked about that part of the movie was the pod race. The pod race was just an insane movie, an insane scene, and again goes back to George Lucas's love for racing, love for cars.
Yeah. The production was phenomenal. The sound engineering, the sampling of, I think it was the F1 or the Formula cars that they used to produce those sounds. It was a really dramatic and well done piece.
I really do agree with that. The thing is, I think that comes from because honestly, if you remember his particular movie back in the 50s, it was based within the 50s. Everything with him is about cars.
Yes.
And that's literally what it, brings to. But also the racing aspect of it, plus Anakin's ingenuity within it. And I really enjoyed that aspect because it shows his capability within like creating a droid, mechanics, robotics, everything. And honestly, that's literally what I enjoyed about that particular whole scene. Yeah, I do enjoy that. Now, mind you, it's a little bit crazy too because he had his like little crew behind him. If you remember, you had a Greedo or a mini Greedo at that point.
The kids were weird.
The kids were definitely weird, and Kitcher,
weird
or
interaction,
whatever it was. And to me, I appreciated it, but honestly, it was pretty cool in the sense that Qui-Gon actually got in on a bet. And it's kind of something out of what Lucas had done before with, with his previous film. Well, not previous film, his first film, I should say. But, to me, it's kind of a callback to that. And I do appreciate it, and I love the character. But the thing is, it could have gone faster.
It was a little drawn out as I was screening the video preparing for this. I think the whole pod race, the race actually lasts like 3 minutes.
Yeah, it does.
But the scenes of the racing last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
So like it's there's a lot that goes into that, and I think as a plot point is cool. But I will say what it successfully does is creates an amazing connection. It's one of those very human connections to like, okay, this is a place full of people doing something.
Yeah.
Like you see these. And by the way, you at this point, your exposure to the Hutt cartel is Return of the Jedi and the ruffians in the stands of this pod.
Exactly.
You have no clue.
You have no clue.
Right? You have no background knowledge.
Until we get
to
to Boba Fett.
right, or the expanded universe content, or even just the Disney canon expanded content outside the cinema. It's there's not a whole lot of that. Most of that stuff comes from games, really. Like when it comes to the Star Wars universe as it's built, but I think that the pod race is just a very human way of tying that stuff back.
I really I agree with you. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. One of the and let's one of the things that of course we were saying how a lot of people complained about some of the digital characters and something like that. Some worked, some didn't work. But one of the ones that I actually liked a lot was Sebulba, who was part of the pod race. The fact that he walks on his hands, but his feet are his hands, or his arms are his feet.
Yep,
his
very
legs
strange
are
creature.
his hands. A very awesome type of design. He's a Doug, right?
Yeah, that's his race.
But he wasn't this comical thing. I mean, he had some comedy into it, like when he lost, and what he said. But he was just mostly an asshole.
He
was
was
definitely an asshole. He basically sabotaged or killed like 5 people during that race,
and no ramifications after that, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's like one of those unspoken things about the Hutt cartels, like Tatooine, and it's fun in like the Mandalorian show because it's literally a Western theme almost.
Yeah.
But like Tatooine is the Wild West. The Outer Rim planets are the Wild West.
I think we got that within Boba Fett when we saw
absolutely
that one scene. What was it, Cod Bane? And
literally
that whole scene. And honestly, I did enjoy that.
Yeah, I would say that. But just bringing it back to the Phantom Menace, it's very much so we're setting the scene for this being this lawless planet, and like of course we had that in Mos Eisley in A New Hope. But now it's coming back to this because I believe this is Mos Espa. It's just another spaceport on Tatooine.
Right.
It's just this lawless place, and I think it's one of those ways that George just subtly sets this universe up with just these really stupid details that all put together become very relatable and human.
Correct.
Yeah, just really cool stuff.
But it's just funny how you were saying it's like he does that, but then when you watch this movie, there's certain we were talking about like there's certain details that are missing that you wish he did, but yet he concentrates on putting some other stuff in there that you're like that should have never been in there.
No.
I think we can. I was just gonna say, I know we have more to our list of what works. I think that you can sum up a lot of the positives of this, of just the complete showmanship,
correct,
visual and sound, and the elaborate, just the fight scenes and all these different elements just brought the Star Wars universe and the excitement of that alive.
Oh yeah, and one of them is like just the introduction of like the lightsaber fight that we got, because all we've ever known is
he's got
Obi-Wan
two
with
blades,
Darth Vader.
dude. Huh? He's got 2 blades.
He has 2
There's
blades.
a double-sided lightsaber, man. There's
and
this weird red guy with 2 blades.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about that?
And for those who are fans, like big-time fans, right? So people saw, wow, 2 blades. The first thing I thought about was, wait a minute, that's Exar Kun's lightsaber. And for those who don't know who Exar Kun is, he is a character in the Star Wars comic books that was presented with a double-bladed lightsaber for the first time.
When was that? When was that content released?
In the 80s?
Oh, boy. Yeah. Well, probably in the 90s or something. No.
Okay.
It was, I mean, right before Phantom Menace.
Before Phantom
Menace, it was
stuff.
just a whole story, about the ancient Jedis and stuff like that. And one of them had a double-bladed. It was shorter, but it was still a double-bladed lightsaber. And I thought it was the coolest thing. I was like, shit, that's awesome. And all of a sudden I see it on screen and I was like, oh, I know what you did.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just so cool, too. Like, I know we'll get into a little bit of, like, the casting and all that, but, like, Ray Park is just... He's a phenomenal martial artist.
Yes.
And Darth Maul as a person, as a character is just so cool because you utilize this amazing skill.
Yeah.
The amazing skill of the actor and what he's literally capable of doing with a bow staff. And you introduce it to this lightsaber fighting and just the overall the fun and the thrill of this movie around the theatrics in that.
Oh, absolutely, and that was and that was one of the things. The way they introduced Darth Maul was just so great. I mean, that was a character who were like, holy shit, we never seen anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But also, again, he was a Sith Lord that was very different from Darth Vader. While Darth Vader was still a scary character, and just his portrayal of who, who he was, as evil as he was, but Darth Maul was just a badass when it came to fighting.
Yeah, you have a Frankenstein murder robot versus this crazy ninja guy with horns and a bow staff. And he's so quiet too. Like, I think he says 3 lines in the whole film.
Yeah, and not even his words too.
Yeah,
he's just parroting what Sidious or Palpatine said.
He became what Boba Fett was to us in the original trilogy.
Yes.
In the sequel.
Yeah, literally.
100%.
It was a character that was kind of hinted on within the holiday special that we got as tease, and then everybody loved and wanted to have more of. And then eventually we got it through the Clone Wars, as well as what was the other show, Rob?
Well,
Rebels.
Yeah.
And there was another one.
And he showed up in Solo.
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
with mechanical legs.
With his mechanical legs, that was the first time, and that Solo was actually one of the first times that they introduced something that they did in an animated series, and they put it right into the
canon.
Well, no, I would say Boba Fett was, but after that, the fact that they brought Darth Maul back to life. They gave him mechanical legs, and all of a sudden you see that in live, in a live film. You're like, "Whoa, okay, that is really cool."
Well, that was due to the fact that in video games in the late '80s, early '90s, they actually did have Darth Maul, and he did have his torso cut, and he came back with spider legs.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I think that Star Wars is an interesting. It's so weird, and it feels like an accident because between some of the best characters being complete mysterious, just people that show up on screen and fight people, and like the fact that we think about all these games they play. Like, I was talking about the Millennium Falcon and how just thrilled I was to be part of that. Just even being on like this made up version of the set at Disney
for Smuggler's Run.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it's so cool. Like, and it's being part of just this thing that they would have done in that universe, let alone like, oh, like here's Darth Vader, right? It's just like just being part of that world. Yeah, is just so cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, and again, that world was helped by the now very famous Industrial Light and Magic, and that's the one thing I think worked in this film very well. Of course, ILM came up with some of the most amazing special effects for this film. Outdid themselves in so many different ways, from the miniature stuff, because again, a lot of people don't realize there was a lot of practical effects. There was a lot of miniatures being used, but of course, the digital effects that they did that. So I think kudos to them for the great job of visually giving us something that was absolutely breathtaking.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would say to tie in one thing that I think will be part of maybe what that didn't work too is talking about plot and talking about how we accomplished some of the plot in the film. And some of the plot in the film came from the Senate, or a lot of it. Like a lot of the major bullet points came from the Senate, and the way that we see this now Senator Palpatine twisting the mind of the naive queen and twisting the minds of the people around him to gain what he's looking for in this event. And I think that it's just incredible to think about how George had this overall arc for what Palpatine does. He's literally a puppet master on both ends of the story. And it's kind of, in my opinion, it's a weird medium, because to the rest of the film, which is like this hyper fun, like super, like a lot of kid service, everything else.
Correct.
It's almost like it's Whiplash. We go from Jar Jar falling off a flight of stairs to like, hey, Senator Palpatine, let's overthrow the government. And it's like,
exactly.
It's just very, very big, emotional swings back and forth where they call for this vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum,
right?
Which is a major character we don't really know anything about based off of this film, but we're basically saying this chancellor, this head of the republic is an idiot. Let's kick him out because I want to do what I want to do. And like this conflict is a great example of like how we do that.
Yeah. And
so
no,
that's
a good, and
ways,
what you're saying is a great example of the fact that we as fans, when we first saw the movie, we accepted what we saw. But as we got older, as we got to see this film more and more, we were more intrigued on what Palpatine was doing in the background in order to gain so much power than all the fluff that we saw ahead of us, in front of us. So it's you're right. It's absolutely amazing, an amazing way to like that's why I always said the sequels, as much as some people don't like them, and like how Palpatine came into power was genius.
Right.
It's just the execution wasn't that great.
Yeah. It starts before the Phantom Menace when it comes to the expanded universe stuff, and that stuff really provides a lot of context. As we go through some of the what didn't work, I think that it's really funny to think about, like, we've got a queen, but like you've also got a senator, and you're part of a republic, but it's a democracy. It's very strange.
And we'll get into that. We'll definitely get into that. And as I was saying, George Lucas gave us an amazing world, and that's one of the things that works. And on this list, George Lucas is on both lists, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But this list of what works is because George just having this idea and this world that he wanted to share with everyone, and we got suckered into it until this day.
Yeah.
You give us Star Wars, and we're there. I mean, look. Even older folks like myself and Mark, we just eat it all up.
Hey, wait. You saying we're old?
Older.
Oh, come on.
Not old. There's a difference.
It's 2022. You guys will live to at least 200.
Oh, really?
So that's all right.
Well,
can I get?
I hope so.
Yeah. Can I get those meds?
Maybe.
Yeah. I am dying to be a burden on somebody.
Yeah, same here.
Sorry, we're all too poor for that. We'll die soon.
But yeah, so then the last thing on this, I would say on the list of things that worked. I'm a big fan of Drew Struzan. Drew Struzan, very famous poster artist that has been used in many of the Star Wars films, many Indiana Jones, many films, many of the most iconic films.
Goonies.
The Goonies, exactly. Many of the most iconic films that you have ever seen or that you have grown up. When you were growing up, you have seen his artwork, and his artwork on this was amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely. And the way that the way he does his artwork, which is a mixed medium of everything that you could think of, but there's just so much life into these posters, and they have become basically this trope within the poster community where everybody now does a lot of things like Drew Struzan does, except they do it through Photoshop as opposed to an actually painting the damn thing.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, his artwork is just
painted.
Huh?
Are these drawn or painted?
Painted.
Drawing and painting, because he uses everything from mixed media, so acrylics to art pencils, you name it. He uses all.
You could
That's
actually
crazy.
get to see him at many a Comic-Con or comic convention, or any convention.
Comic conventions.
Yeah, literally. Chiller Theater Convention in New York, New Jersey, as well as Monster Mania.
Right.
Definitely in Wizard World, which is now Fan Expo, and that's all across the U.S. And you could actually get him.
It sucks that the world that we live in, because what is it? Poster art for films was a big thing back then.
It still
right?
is.
There was no Photoshop. And there's such a hunger for it that, unfortunately, all this Photoshop posters have become the norm. So I believe, he was forced to retire because no one was going to give that much money to an artist for a poster compared to, hey, I'm going to get myself an intern that could do it in Photoshop.
Yeah.
You know, which is how the world is. I used to be a graphic artist, so I definitely know how that feels. So
yeah, it's come a long way too. I mean, it's so easy to do that.
Yeah,
especially
they
when you have all these beautiful 4K
scene,
shots.
Within. But the thing is go to those conventions. If you see those artists like Struzman himself, go there, get him to sign something, pay for it,
support
him.
Yeah,
and he might be able to do something for you, like fan art. Like if you're doing a podcast, hello, you have an artist right there. You could actually get him and consign him to do work for yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so again, you know, that he's one of my favorite artists, especially poster artists. I love collecting his stuff.
Yeah.
In my old apartment, I had an entire wall full of almost every poster that he had. I actually did like 8 by 10s of his posters, so I could fit as many as I can on the wall.
That's really
I couldn't get
really
full
cool.
posters. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, so
that's really awesome.
So we'll run down the list on the stuff that works. So the stuff that we know that works on this film is the score, the design of Naboo, and the designs of those starfighters.
Mm-hmm.
R2's introduction, which was really nice. Qui-Gon, a great character that I wish that we would have had more of. Coruscant, which we all heard and we were so amazed at watching the landscape of what this planet was. Sebulba, for me, as a character, as a digital character, I thought was just very unusual but really cool. The Jedi Temple, which housed all the Jedis, and that's one of the big things that we all wanted to see, where the Jedi at its height.
Yeah.
The pod race, phenomenal scene on that. The lightsaber duels, whether it was in Tatooine or especially the end of the film with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan,
which was actually an original Xbox game. That was an amazing. I still have it and I still own it, and it's fun to actually play.
Yeah, no, it is. So so those lightsaber duels, we got to see the Jedi basically at its height when it came to dueling with these lightsabers, as opposed to seeing an old man and a broken down half man, half machine man, and then Luke Skywalker, who's never been trained with a lightsaber. So you got to see the artistry of using that lightsaber. So I thought that was fun.
Yeah.
The Senate, I thought that was really cool, the way they portrayed the Senate of so many different worlds. I thought it was
and you could actually see
just
ETs, some
that was
xenomorphs.
That was a fan service, and I think that was George Lucas' way of getting back at Steven Spielberg for putting Yoda in E.T.
But there were also xenomorphs too for Ridley Scott.
Were they?
There's
I never saw that.
They're in there.
Where were those?
They're in there.
They're in there?
They're in there.
Damn it, Mark! You're gonna make me see that movie again.
Yes, I know.
All right,
not again. We'll fast forward.
Yeah,
we'll
and then of course Darth Maul, great character
cool.
that I wish we seen more, and we got to see it at in
later on.
In other mediums, and stuff like that.
25 years later.
Yeah. ILM for doing such a great job. George Lucas for giving us such a great world. And of course, the marketing for this, which was one of them was Drew Struzan's poster. Now, the things that did not work in this film.
Hey, Rob.
Yes.
Can I segue?
Go ahead.
I want to segue. So
yeah, go ahead.
Because I have such a comment when it comes to one of our first things about what didn't work.
Okay.
So it's so funny to me looking at Drew Struzan's poster that the title, The Phantom Menace, has in the biggest part of the poster Darth Maul's face.
Yes.
Being that he's not the Phantom Menace.
Nope.
And I think it's just as well. And I promise I'll T Swift. I'll let you finish. And all that.
I know where you're going with this.
It's just so funny to me because even in the production of the movie, on someone who's on the payroll of the film, the Phantom Menace has Darth Maul as this huge, this beautiful tattooed black and red poster. And the bottom line is the Phantom Menace wasn't Darth Maul. The Phantom Menace was
Palpatine.
Emperor Palpatine.
Palpatine.
Senator Palpatine. And so it's like it's such a like that title requires an explanation, and it's you can't do that, right? It's a title. Like a title can't require an explanation, and I think so many things in this film require explanation.
Oh, absolutely,
and
man.
that's where we'll get into with everything else. But I'm sorry, I'll let you finish.
It's cool.
But that's where I wanted to segue it, because it's just like even the people involved in this film didn't have clarity as to what the hell it meant. Well, so how could the audience?
Was kind of the Alfred Hitchcock thing within Psycho, because nobody knew that, the son had killed everybody, and it was the mom, and
So, yeah, no, exactly. So the things that so now we get into the stuff that didn't work. Let's start with just what Zach was saying.
Yeah.
The title, The Phantom Menace.
Mm-hmm.
I know George likes to get into. I know George. He just pops in there.
Of course.
I know George he's always been a big fan of the serialized shows that he grew up with, and they used to have these really cheesy episode names. That's why you see stuff like The Phantom Menace.
Well, it was taken from
Clones.
Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe.
Correct.
Literally, that's where it came from, and that's where George actually took the idea and inspiration from, which I understand because it was episodic and it was serialized. But the thing is, it took him so long to serialize his movie system.
Yeah, but it was so funny because it was like The Phantom. When I saw The Phantom Menace, what the fuck kind of title is that?
It's like a porno movie,
Yeah.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. Listen, hey,
The sexy
I was
plumber.
like The Phantom Menace, stupid. What is it? Stupid title, but it's Star Wars. I'm still gonna see it.
Right. Well, and that's one of the biggest running jokes in the Star Wars universe is saying, have you seen the first Star Wars film? And you're like, oh, episode 1 or episode 4. It's like, it's always been that way where people have had this like, ha ha ha, who's on first kind of conversation.
Yeah, well,
about
yeah,
it.
if you think about The Phantom Menace, it's like, oh, wow, that's a really bad porn film. I have to put a cork in my butt. And then you got A New Hope. I'm like, oh, great. Is this a guy with a big, huge dong? I don't know.
Yeah. Don't get me Attack of the Gangbang Clones.
I believe I have that.
Yeah, I believe it.
Is there
on VHS, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that both figuratively and literally were inappropriate about this. And and
talking about inappropriate, like let's talk about the pneumonians in the movie who sounded Asian.
Oh yeah.
Not even just Asian, but ignorantly Asian American. It
Yes.
wasn't just Asian. They were speaking English, or let's call it Galactic Basic,
Yeah.
right? But like they were like known as these financial trades, like
No, there are
trade
two of
federation.
them.
That was yeah. Well, and they literally represented like this pseudo People's Republic of China, like making cheap crap and embargoing a trade route. It's like really on the nose, man. Like. If this film flew today, like it would get canceled.
Oh, it's a
faster
cancel
than,
culture actually started
Firefly
after this
season
particular
2.
movie. You do realize this,
Right.
Oh no, I get it, but it's like, and we'll get into some more of that stuff. But it's so crazy what we got away with.
Yeah, no,
back
exactly.
then,
20 years ago.
Like it's like 22 years
23
ago.
years.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, 23. Yep.
It's crazy to think.
And now we come
Hey.
to
I'm not done yet. I didn't
now,
come yet.
now we come to the one thing in this movie that has been the biggest talk for decades.
Okay.
It's so fucking bad.
Jar Jar Binks.
It's just not okay.
All right. Okay. Is this a character that represents me personally as a person who's not educated? And Misa don't know how to respond, possibly, and
No,
is completely ignorant to the world. Now, mind you, I can understand Lucas's thoughts about Jar Jar. It was kind of a, I'm gonna say
it was a cash grab, man. Let's just talk about it. It was a cash grab. That's all it was.
But it was also a comedic getaway.
We didn't need it
for the kids. And honestly, and A New Hope and everything from the original trilogy was literally Chewbacca, because all he did was
sure.
or the
droids
and the droids themselves. Like C-3PO.
The droids were amazing.
Yeah. But honestly, I can understand Jar Jar to some degree, but if we go into canon and all those of us that love the idea of making Jar Jar a Sith Lord, I am there with you.
That's been around there for a long time.
All of you. I would love to see Jar Jar come back and go, Misa gonna make you pay. And have a lightsaber, honestly. But the thing is, it was the kind of Three Stooges person that was needed within the particular movie to give it a lighthearted aspect for the kids that are out there. Right. And the thing is that he went a little bit over the top with this particular character. Now, mind you,
a lot of it over the top.
And the actor that actually played Jar Jar Binks, and he was there physically, not only just verbally.
Yeah. Ahmed Best.
And he had death threats. He was at the point of suicide at certain points because of the way people talked about him. And honestly, Ahmed, I think he did a great job in what he had done for what he was given. Now, mind you, the character could have been done a little bit better. And I think that had to do with the writing of the particular character by Lucas himself. But
yeah,
I think Lucas was trying to appeal to that kid nature from the original films of making
and that's exactly what he wanted to do. He just wanted to appeal to the kids, but he did it in such a, how can I say, kids don't have to be talked down to.
It was so on the nose.
Yeah,
it was so on the nose.
He did it in such a way that the character came out annoying.
Yeah.
Every time you saw him on screen, till this day, every time I see him on screen, I'm like, he should have just gotten killed.
Yeah,
at that very first attack in Naboo.
Yeah, the
boom,
Boomba.
you kill him.
Well, I get killed by a Boomba.
Yeah. So here's where I'm not. I want to use the term pulling rank just because of my unique exposure to this, both as a child and now. And like I said earlier in the podcast, it's like, it's something that I experienced some of the original trilogy before I stepped foot into Phantom Menace, and I was literally 5, right? And I enjoyed the crap out of Star Wars before Jar Jar, before any of that. And frankly, you could have gift-wrapped me anything, even at that age. And just the premise of the pod racing and the beautiful, like the cool fighters and the action figures and the droids and all those different things already had my buy-in. You did not have to, and I'm not damning the thought process, right? And I think hindsight being 2020, that would probably be something that was done differently. But like, we didn't, like, in looking back, I didn't need it. And I don't speak for everybody, all the millennials out there that watch Star Wars, but like, I didn't need that. And I think that the Gungan relationship was fine. I think that the story plot of there being this other species or this other civilization coming to help out the mainlanders of the planet wasn't necessarily the problem. I think it was so ridiculous. Like, if you go back, like the first scene where they drop down on this battalion of battle droids inside the city of Naboo, like Jar Jar's like dangling from the balcony, like jumping down to the Jedi. It's like, it's just littered throughout this visual, physical comedy.
Exactly. It's like again, he was there for comic relief, but it was comic relief that was not witty like the droids were in the first trilogy. It was more like, this is for kids because, hey, the kids are going to tell their parents, I want a Jar Jar Binks stuffed animal
and they don't.
Toy.
I'd love to see the data. I'd love to see the data of what the Ewoks did to Mattel or to Lucasfilms or whatever, or Hasbro.
Return of the Jedi, I can tell you that.
Yeah. If it didn't do well, like, why did we do it again?
Because this is George Lucas.
Yeah, and I think and I don't want to jump ahead, but George Lucas, I think, is an amazing storyteller when it comes to creating an amazing world, a universe, literally. But when we talk about some other things here, and I'm going to steal the segue again, but like the dialogue.
Oh,
like
shit,
the George Lucas concept of what a human conversation is just completely off base with reality. It's like there's a lot of really weird interactions, cringeworthy scenes, and that goes throughout the entire prequel trilogy.
It makes me think, oh wow, everything that I had in my dreams are really crappy. Wow, that is worse.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's almost like the person writing the script didn't have a conversation with people. Like,
now, mind you,
right.
I do enjoy George Lucas, and I love him as a screenwriter.
Oh yeah,
and a director. But the thing is, there are certain things that could not be conveyed, meaning that he should have actually conveyed that to somebody else, and then collaborated. Yes. And then we omit those little things, and then make it more. And it would be 100% a perfect movie.
Yeah. And I think that now we have things like, hey, Dave Filoni. Hey, Dave, this is what I think would be a really awesome idea for this story arc. Can you operationalize this for me? Because, like, I really think these characters should do this, but I don't know how to put it on paper. Can you help?
And I think Dave
and I think that's where we get these huge, amazing successes.
Yeah, I think Dave actually does take criticism and take that input and from fans, because he knows as a fan you want to take that from fans and what would make it work properly. But with George, he already has it stuck in his head. He's got it in his head. This is perfect for the world. But the thing is, sometimes that doesn't work. Very much like what Rob, you and I were talking about with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and as well as the Eternals. Kevin Feige has kind of stepped away, and a lot within the pandemic, with all the writing and miscommunication, we've got a lot of crap that's going on. Hopefully they can fix this in another year or two.
Yeah, I'm hoping on that big time. Yeah. So from Jar Jar Binks, the dialogue from Jar Jar Binks, but let's be honest, the dialogue throughout the entire movie. Yeah. But Jar Jar Binks being one of the Gungans, and of course Boss Nass, like that whole race.
The portrayal of that race.
These are not a
the worst people.
Part. I had a problem with that entire race. The entire race, it's just like a whole bunch of stupid people that were allowed to procreate,
and they had a lot of power under the water.
Yes.
Oh, there's a bunch of problems. We were chatting about this earlier. There's a bunch of problems with the race. Like there's somehow have these land units, and they have this army. Who are they fighting?
And they could
they fighting
and
fish?
Breathe on the land too. By the way,
yeah. Like there's no rhyme or reason as to how the Gungans exist or what they do, why they're down there.
It's an
like
aquatic...
I need a novel as to what the Gungan life is. It could be nonfiction if you prefer. Like I just need a guide as to what a Gungan does, why they exist as a society, and like how that even happened.
Yeah,
because
it's
like the fact that they're coming up as an army to help with anything is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's an aquatic species, right?
Yeah.
So it's an aquatic species that needs bubbles of air.
Uh-huh.
So I was talking to Zach, and I said, because he thought, well, maybe they just breathe air. And it's like, no, because when he goes into the water, the Jedi have to take breathers, but then he just swam along like nothing. So
he's Aquaman. He could actually breathe.
Yeah, so he could breathe underwater. Why do you need a whole city of bubble? If you could breathe underwater, then just go. Go with that theme. But this was also
where Star Wars really is fantasy and not sci-fi.
Yeah, it was that. It was the fact that there was what is it? Oh, we're gonna go through the planet core, and this is where now the scientific part of my brain was like, but
explodes.
Wait a minute, there's a molten core on a planet like that. How are you going to go through the core?
Die in the core than here. What am Misa saying?
Yeah. Exactly. So they're an aquatic, species, but they have terrestrial. And then we were like, wait a minute. So there's only 2 species on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
Only 2 humanoids.
Yeah, exactly.
There's the Naboo, who have no army.
Yep.
So if the Naboo is the entire planet, or terrestrial part of the planet, and the Gungans are the aquatic part. The Naboo don't have their own army, but the Gungans have an army. What have they been training for?
For their fishing
Why
trips.
do they have an army? Were they going to invade the Naboo at one point and say, "Fuck this"? You guys are now our slaves.
Yep.
Why did they have an army and the other one
with?
didn't?
Like, how do they learn how to fight on the land? Like, I just don't understand. And this really, like, we got to put a pin in this at some point.
They had
the
Ash
Gungan
Williams.
Is a paradox.
They had Ash Williams from Evil Dead. And he did the and do that, and then
Yeah.
But I'm feeling you guys both because it's like the Gungans actually easily could take over the Naboo, and apparently the Naboo had only anything but technology because they had those spaceships that were far better than what we got in A New Hope.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think.
Well, shit, the Gungans have technology too, because if you can make a city that has these bubbles of air,
Plasma
and
energy.
you could just phase right through them, and trust me, that's some amazing technology too. So
yeah, we gotta get to the next step.
Yeah,
but,
so
like, I will say the Gungan plasma balls is another one that's like, what is this energy and where does it come from?
Exactly.
And I think Rob, we should do the Naboo portion just as one, because I
right,
think
you guys
that
go.
it's really
exactly.
it's really
So-
just as the next like major culture thing on the planet.
Exactly.
Take it
So
away, sir.
here's what I say. So you have a 14-year-old that got elected to be the queen of Naboo. Well,
Yep, that's
let's
right.
talk about that. You are
Sure.
either a queen, which is a monarchy,
Yep.
or you are either elected. And if you're elected,
Yep.
why
Or you're a
in
dictator
the
of some
hell
sort.
will you elect a 14-year-old?
Well, Rob, this is another important point. I'm really glad you asked, and I'm going to be the representative of Naboo in this conversation. For the sake of theater. Well, see, here in the city /planet / governance of Naboo, we actually only have 10 people, because that's as many as you see in screen in this movie.
Okay. That is true.
You either serve the royal guard. You either serve the royal guard, or you are the queen or the handmaidens. That's actually our entire population. And so when we vote, it's really a fashion contest. It's whoever can wear the craziest makeup and headdress becomes queen. But we actually don't have the power to govern ourselves, so we still have a senator to the republic that we're a sovereign nation in somehow. So I think Naboo is a bunch of fish and a weird fashion show, and that's it. Where do they get the money for these structures? I don't know. I don't get it. But like, we don't. Who's the other like famous person from Naboo? Like, it's Padme Amidala, the queen, aka America's top model. Sorry, Naboo's top model. And then you have Senator Palpatine, aka Shmi, aka whatever the hell his name was, and like his whole existence is like, I'm going to be a mean bad guy, and this is just from the film. I'm going to be a mean bad guy and mess up everything because my planet's too stupid, and I'm the only man on this planet that isn't part of the royal guard. So I obviously that was all bullshit and probably not the intention of what we wanted to convey, but like, that's what we see in the movie,
right?
Is like, that is the exclusive thing. Like, we don't see citizens panicking like, our people are dying. What people? We're all in this room. Like, what's going on here?
It's and again, we keep going with the Naboo. There was just so many things about that. Like, one, she's like, "Oh, my people are dying." We never got to see that part of it. Shit, show me these people dying. Show me why I have to. Show me why the entire galaxy should go to the help of these people, as opposed to, hey, there's only about, like, Zach saying, there's only about 10 of us in this awesome palace with just beautiful, landscape that has not been touched. Now, we have all seen images of the Ukrainian war, and in 1 month, Ukraine is basically a parking lot now.
Yeah,
dude.
And you're telling me that the Trade Federation came and invade Naboo And
they just
Jane
walked through the door and said it's ours now.
Yeah, right.
And so easily took over. Now here's the funny thing: where is the Secret Service for the Queen?
That's the handmaidens, aka the runner up in Naboo's top model.
If we have somebody, a foreign country, invade the United States, which I don't think it will ever happen, but if we have something like that, the first thing that the president gets it's 100 Secret Service people, taking him away to a safe place. No, she stands there and watches them come in.
Well, you also have every armed American blowing up whatever looks like an enemy coming towards their house. we have way too much spunk for that kind of thing to happen.
Right.
But we don't see any evidence at it at all. To your point, it's always this pristine. Like, who's doing the landscaping in this place?
I want to hire him.
He's obviously very efficient. Like, we don't even see landscapers running around taking care of all these beautiful plants. It's 100%. It's this 3D backdrop, right? And that's probably a lot of what it is in the greater shots, but it's not a believable place.
No, it's not. The only time we see the citizens,
fake.
Yeah, the only time we see the citizens is towards the end of the movie at the celebration. But other than that, we don't see none of the things that they were talking about. It's like, my people are dying. Well, where are the people that are dying? Where are the people? Period. If it wasn't a droid army, if it was just a foreign, another foreign alien coming in, I would say, okay, they're eating them or something like that. But no, these are droids, so.
And then you have so many citizens that you have to have decoys for your queen.
Exactly. And that's the other thing. Here's what's funny. And I remember Zach and I, again, talking about this. I was like, so when the Jedi rescue the queen and they take her away, the decoy is the one standing in for the queen.
Right.
The decoy sends the queen in disguise to clean up the droids. Does that make sense? Think about that.
I'd be pretty pissed.
Yeah, think about that. I was like, I'm the decoy. I'm going to send the queen to not only clean up the droids, but we're still discussing, what's going on with the planet and how we could get help from the Senate. But I'm going to send the queen to clean up a droid and just be not part of this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and we were talking about it a little bit. Like, how would you possibly operate that scenario, right? So, if you're a handmaiden that's in the room with the queen 90% of the time, how would you be the queen 100% of the time? Like, how would you find ways to actually contribute?
Right.
And is it that you don't really need to, and this is all a 10-person society full of cardboard cutout people? Or is this is there just some system of how this works that we're just not privy to?
Right.
And there's this one time in the film that she refers to Padme and defers it, and she almost says something back to her like, hell yeah, go ahead, or with more words and in a more, constructive way or more proper way. But she almost says in her own words, yeah, go ahead, the queen's good.
Yeah. No.
And it's it's so weird that we only see that once. And then when we have these really big, oh my God, this weird culture in the middle of nowhere in this room full of 10,000 delegates for the Senate is just going to say, hey, that Chancellor Valorum guy, yeah, fuck him. It's that wasn't Padme's call, at least not on paper, not visually.
Right, yeah, exactly.
It's holy crap, man. Can you imagine if President Biden was in front of people and I just said, hey, yeah, just do whatever you want, and that's what flew. That's it's the same level of what's going on here.
Right. So besides the whole, the whole Naboo debacle, we were talking about how the pneumonians were sounding Asian. Well, what about Watto sounding Middle Eastern?
Oh God. The boy or his mother?
Honestly, all right. This is something personal to me. When I looked at Watto, when I actually saw it in the theater, it reminded me of my grandfather.
Wow.
Very much Italian. The big nose.
Those cultures share a lot. Yeah, that's true.
A heavy Italian culture going, no, you need to do this. I could see that from my grandfather, and my grandfather didn't really speak like that, but I could see that, and that was the one thing I saw from my grandfather, and I loved it. My grandfather had passed before then, but the one thing I got from the movie was that, and I was like, oh, that's Grandpa, that's Tony Gallo. I'm like, okay, cool. But honestly, I didn't see anything bad about it. Very much like with the issues with now there are two of them. With the Asian kind of things that were going on. Me, honestly, there has to be something that we all have to be attracted to assimilate with. And with this, it is a fictitious world. It is fantasy. Yeah. It is sci-fi. But you have to orient it in a sense that we have to identify it with what we already know or what we experience with. Now, if you can't take that with a grain of salt, that means you're very, very much too sensitive in this world.
No, it's true. No, I definitely agree with you. I mean, and let me tell you, I never had a problem with it until somebody pointed it out to me, and I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. That sounds like this, or that sounds like that. And I'm still okay with it. You have the cancel culture that is like, oh, no, that should never happen. It
hasn't aged well.
Right, so it hasn't aged well. But here's what's funny. So Disney being a company that always tries to make sure that they're either doing the right thing or they'll even edit their own movies just to make sure that something
or shows
does not get seen. But on Disney Plus, it's still there.
It is still there, yes. And they do put a discrepancy too in there. So
do they really?
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay, I didn't even know that.
The other thing about that, too, is that's not the last time we've seen that in Star Wars. So if you go into the Clone Wars series, the Twi'lek are actually depicted as French.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're depicted with heavy French accents.
Right.
And it's I guess there is something very human about just the fact that these different cultures, and, I had this huge shtick, and this isn't really part of this, but I just noticed when I was watching Phantom Menace that there's humans all over the place in the Star Wars universe. Where the hell did they come from?
Yeah, exactly.
We're over here, like in Africa. Like if you're a student of science on this planet, humans originated in Africa some millions of years ago, and we've evolved into what we are today by evolution. And so, from a science fiction standpoint, at some point we discovered space travel, and at some point we went to all these different planets, but there had to have been a scientific Earth somewhere in the Star Wars universe that started all this.
Yeah, it's called Battlestar
Galactica. Kind of a weird thing.
And it was the Egyptian race, and the Egyptians, the gods of Egypt came down and brought them over.
Yep.
Also,
we have way too much.
Basically,
content,
Stargate too.
Yeah,
huh?
exactly. And on top of that, with the Twi'leks, they have those kind of phallic kind of things on their heads.
So obviously they're French. They got dicks on their head.
Yeah, exactly.
Great, yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for filling us in on that, Mark. thanks for drawing those dots.
But moving on.
Now, all the women out there are going to be very jealous because we don't have a lot of vaginas out there. So, Star Wars, if you're out there, Feige, Filoni,
I'm gonna just get this edited out really quick. But have you thought about the Ithorians for a second? The big, those guys that have the fucking eyes, they look like hammerhead sharks.
Oh, yeah.
They have those gills on the side of their head. That might work, is all I'm saying.
Okay. That'll work.
Oh, my God.
Might work.
We have to go to that extreme,
Oh, my God. Best podcast ever, I'll say, people. So... Moving on, like I said, So, young Anakin Skywalker, man, what did we think about him and Jake? Him, and who portrayed him? Jake Lloyd.
I can give you a one word answer to that.
Crazy?
What?
Yippee! So I couldn't be as a fan of Darth Vader and a fan of everything else, and I actually remember this. My dad, who brought me to the theater,
okay.
At one point we were speaking, and I don't remember when this happened, so don't quote me on anything, but he at some point was like, man, Never in my life did I ever want to see Darth Vader, this super awesome villain, as a helpless child. And like, I think there's a few things that I wanted to sprinkle in that I think we're gonna cover, but like, there's a lot of really cringy stuff that goes on with Padme and Anakin because we know where that's going, right? And like, it's clear in this whole thing that like that's the plan. Now, we talked about him, right, as this like, this young kid that's being sold through slavery, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but like, he is too young for the pairing with Padme. Like, you have too much of an age discrepancy, and when it comes to like the actor, I'm almost of the opinion, especially call it 23 years ago, child actors are a product of what they're given. Right. And I'd say to a certain degree, like in the same way that I'm not a really good basketball player in the NBA, like I don't have any exposure to being that. Right. And so I'm only the best basketball player as I have experience being. And I think that anything else comes from constructive criticism. So I would say that the acting, I wouldn't crucify the actor so much as I'd crucify the casting choice, and I'd crucify the content, right? And I think that you could have taken any kid, right? Because at this point, we don't know what Anakin looks like. We have no clue.
Very true.
Right? We have no idea. And I think we'll talk a little bit. I know we're running deep in time right now, by the way. We're, we could have chosen anybody.
Well, with that, if you could choose somebody, who would it be at that time?
Well, tell you what, why don't we hold off on that, because there is a section on that for actors that I have for who will we actually, change. Okay. Because there's other actors that I feel that probably should have been changed, maybe because of, their experience but we'll get into that. But yeah, Anakin Skywalker, his portrayal, so let's not blame Jake. I did put him on the list, Jake Lloyd's acting. If you see Jake Lloyd, like, let's say, what is it, Jingle All the Way?
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, he was in there. He wasn't that bad.
He wasn't bad in that particular episode. No.
Right. So we have to pretty much blame, old Flannel himself, for the flannel man, George Lucas.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, you have that bewildered look. The old flannel himself for making
that
decision. Jake Lloyd, I guess, act the way he did. Just the dialogue, But here's the whole thing. One, Anakin Skywalker is a slave. We were talking about that. These are some slaves are living pretty well.
Yeah, they're living in Danish prisons with flat screen TVs and massages every hour.
It's not like you see them really suffering. You see the they have their own apartments or their own little hovels. They're able to have time off. The whole yippee thing. I mean, of course, I cringe every time. But he's a slave and he's happy. So it's like, what happened there? So that Anakin Skywalker as a slave just doesn't come off that way to me.
No,
and I don't think that worked at all.
No, he wasn't oppressed as much as you want. Yeah.
Yeah, he was oppressed in a really Hollywood kind of way. I mean, it was not a convincing strife situation. And we talk about that a little bit, I think,
to be touched by a flying little Italian man who talks with a heavy accent. Yippee!
Yippee indeed. And it's so strange. It's so strange that that whole situation was like that. And I don't think it's on our list necessarily, but his mom just readily goes, you got to get out of here. It really sucks. Go be a Jedi.
Well, and also the fact that let's talk about that. It's I gave birth to him. I carried him. I gave birth to him, and It's okay. Was Shmi Skywalker engaging into orgies and things of that nature, and she didn't know exactly because she got roofied and then had a child and didn't know who it was, and it was Palpatine because he gave him all the midichlorians known to man, and then she woke up the next day and she was pregnant.
Yeah, hey, I mean, no, exactly. So, tell you what, we're gonna take a little break here. So, and we'll be right back. Hey folks, that was part 1 of our part 2 review of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Join us next week as we conclude this review with Mark and Zach. If you like this episode, please leave us a review. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or whatever podcast player of your choice you use. You can also email us at fantasypicksmovieedition@gmail.com, and you can find us on Instagram and Facebook under Fantasy Picks Movie Edition, and in Twitter under @FantasyPicksME. Also, we are now part of the Pirate Core Entertainment Network. Make sure you check out their other podcasts, Adrenaline Cinema, Run for Your Lives, and Watched in the 80s. Thank you, and see you next time.